Hello, I've decided to present my paper on the issue of poverty in Fiji because it really struck me as something significant as I went on the mission trip. In 2006, my family holidayed in Fiji, but we were pretty sheltered from the poverty, as most tourists are. We didn't really see much of Fiji, especially the rural communities, and spend most of our time in the luxury of the resort that we were staying at. So this time when I went on mission trip, I was particularly taken aback by the significance of the poverty and the living conditions of the locals in Lautoka, Nadi and Suva. We obviously saw a lot more of the poverty than what most tourists do. So despite Fiji having a really significant tourist industry, that's not really the reality for the locals living in Fiji. And obviously the major issue for locals is poverty and malnourishment. This is starting to decline. At the moment, research suggests that there's about 30% of Fijians live below the poverty line. That equates to about 250,000 people, which is a pretty large number. The main reasons for poverty in Fiji are to do with the political instability of the nation and the corruption that's also inherent there. Other statistics suggest that 40 to 50% of Fijians don't earn enough money to actually meet their basic needs, which is pretty disappointing. The political turmoil that Fiji faces is due to the diverse population of Fijians. About a half of the Fijian community are indigenous to Fiji. About another 50% were Indo-Fijians coming from India, and then there's also a small number of Chinese who also make Fiji their home. And there exists informal segregation between these groups, and this permeates social and political life of the nation, causing ethnic tensions, influence corruption, and this also leads to increases in poverty and hardship. Since 1987, there have been 4 political coups, and this has also led to a sharp decline in tourism and major economic instability as a result. The government situation is also quite volatile in Fiji, and this has contributed to a lack of or decline in private investments and exports. It also has led to the emigration of skilled labourers who have left Fiji as a result. Another important consideration about the poverty in Fiji is the lack of education. There's a large number of families who aren't in a position to be able to send their children to school, particularly secondary education, and this means that workers lack the skills and resources necessary to be able to provide for their families and to get themselves out of poverty. One of the reasons that they don't attend school is to do with the fees associated with schooling and also the travel costs of getting their children to those schools. Good news was in 2014 the government decided to introduce free access to education for all students, and this has gone a long way to alleviating the problem of lack of education. So hopefully things will start to improve in that arena as more families send their children to school and become better educated. There's a wide income gap between the rich and the poor in Fiji. Fiji was once considered a self-employed, self-sufficient nation. However, this has changed. The subsistence sector is still really important, but most families don't earn enough money to be able to meet their basic needs. This forces rural families to move to urban squatter settlements nearer to the cities in order to find employment, but they end up living in shanty towns, which we saw as we were travelling through Fiji. All these tiny little sheds, really, which really blew me away. many of the households, even though the poorer households, do now have one person in the family who is in paid employment. Unfortunately, though, despite their paid employment, they still don't earn enough money to keep them out of poverty. I noticed in Fiji that the living expenses were similar to what they are in Australia. In terms of going to the supermarket, the food on the supermarket shelves was very similar in price to Australia, but obviously Fijians don't earn the same wages as we do, so it would be really, really difficult and a real struggle to meet all the needs of the family and to live on such a low income. In 1990, the government sought to eradicate poverty, which was really fantastic. And in doing this, they introduced new programs designed to assist the poor and disadvantaged families. They tried to improve the productivity capacity of the local Fijian people. They tried to improve access and performance of social security services, social services, I should say. And they also wanted to increase the capacity of community groups to work with and to assist the poor. So these things would go a long way to helping the poverty crisis in Fiji. Unfortunately, these programs and policies are hindered by the political instability in the nation. And this is probably the most significant reason why there exists such a big issue with poverty in Fiji. It was great in 2014, military rule ended, and this brought a new hope for Fiji. The nation rejoined the Commonwealth, and they embraced an independent judiciary and also became an active civil society. In recent times, the government have sought to rebuild roads in rural areas. They have put in place the necessary infrastructure on water and sewerage, which will be an immense help to the locals. The roads will assist families to be able to market the produce that they're making, and that will create some income for them. And the roads will also enable better access to essential services that they need access to. So there's lots of terrific things happening in Fiji to try and reduce the poverty rate. However, all these things rely on the military forces in the country respecting and continuing to respect the democracy and keeping their noses out of the political affairs of the country. As more and more other nations and international aid gets involved with Fiji, and the government continues to improve, and there's a bright future for Fiji, and I look forward to a day when we can visit Fiji and actually see that there's more of an equal playing field, that it's not so obvious, the rich and the poor are not so obvious, and that there's just a less obvious poverty kind of situation, crisis in that nation. Anyway, thanks for listening. Bye.